Hey guys, this is a welcome to Photoshop tutorial that I put together so that you can get used to working in the Photoshop workspace. So we're going to go over kind of the basics of the workspace within Photoshop and then mostly focus on the Move tool and the Layers panel. So these are like two essentials that you have to know in order to be successful in Photoshop. And you are responsible for learning these because you will use them throughout the rest of the year in photography and in photography too if you continue. So to start out, what I want you to do is open up this file, which is named PS Workspace Intro.psd. And this can be found on your computer desktop, either in the resources folder or the templates folder. I'm not sure what it's called on your desktop, but it should be one of those. And make sure that it's the PSD file. PSD is the file for Photoshop, and that means that when it's saved, it preserves the individual layers so that it can continue to be edited. So go ahead and open that up, and it should look something like this, at least with similar elements. So once you have that, you're going to go to Window up here at the top, and we're going to reset the workspace. So most likely this one's checked, Essentials default. But we're going to go ahead and go through the process of resetting it because sometimes people have different preferences and you might open up Photoshop and it doesn't look the same as what you're used to. So I want to show you how to get it back to the way that you are used to working. So even though that's checked, we're going to come down here and go to Reset Essentials and click that. And now you can see Photoshop has reset it to its default of Essentials, and it kind of makes our workspace smaller. We've got some things that we don't necessarily need to open in order to work on our projects. So now we're going to fix it up a little bit. So we're going to go back up to Window, and you can see that the things are checked are open. So we've got color here, we can see color here. Layers is showing here. So we've got all these things checked that are open. And what we want to do is get rid of this libraries because we don't need this panel. So we're going to click that to uncheck it. And that goes away. The other thing we don't need right now is this properties and layer adjustments. So we're going to go back to Window and click on properties, and now that's away. So now we're back to how it was when we started, and this is how you'll probably want to work because this has everything organized the best for our purposes anyway. So some other areas that you should know in Photoshop, this is your tools panel, and when you hover over a tool, it will give you a little tip of what the tool is and the shortcut command for it, as well as a link to learn more of it on some of them. So like, oops, I can't get this one. So Move tool, we've got, this is named the Move tool. The shortcut on your keyboard is V, and you could click this link to learn a little bit more about it from Adobe, and they've got tons of videos and resources. So it's a great place to check out to learn more about each of these tools. And if you scroll down, so this is the Move, we've got some selection tools. This is the crop tool, so we'll be using this a lot. The C is the shortcut on your keyboard for crop. And I invite you to scroll down and learn more about these. There's some other ones that we'll be using in the future. But for right now, we're mostly focused on this Move tool. So we're going to make sure that that's selected. The other thing is this right here, where our file name is showing, that is called the Documents tab, and if we had more than one document open, there would be other tabs here in this empty space. But right now we just have the one, and so this is all that we see. This area above here, this is called the Options panel, and this will change depending on what tool you're on within your Tools panel. So I'll just click down to Crop, and we can see that that Options panel changes to give us some options that go along with the Crop tool. And then up here where we've got Photoshop CC, File, Edit, etc., that's the application bar. So if you are in Photoshop and for some reason you don't see image or file or something like that, a lot of times what happens is you're on the Finder window and you just need to click within Photoshop to bring this back up. Other than that, we've got colors and swatches and then our layers panel over here. So it's kind of the general workspace. So now we're going to work on manipulating these different layers. And again, I want to make sure I'm on the Move tool. I've got two choices up here. I've got this auto select that I can check and uncheck. I've got layer or group, but right now I want to be layer. I've got show transform controls that I can check or uncheck. And then I've got these various alignment choices for my layers. So right now you can tell that nothing over here is selected because no layers are highlighted. So if I want to click on layer 1, it's highlighted. And I can tell that that's the layer that I'm working on because right now I have the show transform controls selected and I can see the transform controls and the bounding box for that layer. If I were to uncheck this, that disappears and I can't see that it's selected, but I know that it is because I can click on it and move. And I know that it's selected because it's highlighted over here. So if I were to click on this one, that's also selected. It's easier to see though with the transform controls on. So when these are on, I can change the shape and size of my layer. So I can, with my mouse, I can click on this, like the little boxes, and I can make it narrower. I could make it shorter. I could come over here and hover kind of outside a corner, and I could rotate it. And this is okay with shapes. We're skewing it, we're not maintaining its proportion. And that's okay with a shape, but when we're working with photographs, which is mostly what we would be doing in here since it is photography, you always want to only scale from the corners and always hold down Shift. And when you do that, it maintains the proportion of the image. So you always want to hold down Shift and scale from the corners. If you hold down Shift and scale from the side ones, it doesn't do anything. It just makes you able to do that. So always hold down Shift, scale from the corners when you're dealing with a photograph. And then once we've made these changes, Photoshop wants us to confirm that we want to actually make this change. And the way that it does that is it doesn't let you do anything else to another layer until you've applied that change. So you can do that two ways. You can either click the check up here and it will apply the change. You can hit enter on your keyboard, or you can double click within the shape to apply the change. So I'm just going to go ahead and click the check and it will apply that change for me. If for some reason I didn't want to apply the change, so I've changed this again and I don't want to do that, I can click this little circle with a bar through it to say, nope, I want to go back. Another thing to go back is if you hold down Command Option on your keyboard and click a Z, that will take you back. And you can click Z as many times until you get back to where you want it to be. So Command Option together and then press Z. So I've made some changes and applied them. And I can do that with each layer. If I want to go to the circle layer, I can click over here because I've got my auto select clicked on, so I can just click onto the layer and it will move the bounding box over there to show my transform controls. I can make some changes here. I can also, if I look over here in my layers panel, I see these little, this is like a thumbnail of each layer. So it's kind of a mini version of each layer. And when we look really closely at it, we can see this like checkerboard pattern in the background of layer 1 and this ellipse 1 layer. And then on this one, we see a white background. So that checkerboard pattern represents transparency. So we can see through to the layer below it. Another thing to look at is that I've got my opacity. You can see that you can sort of see through this yellow triangle, and I've got the opacity set down to 62, so I can bump that all the way up to 100. Now I can't see through it at all. It's completely opaque, but my transparency is still there, and I can do the same thing with my ellipse. I can put it back up to 100%, so now I can't see through the shape, but I still have my transparency. And another thing we can do over here is next to each layer thumbnail is an eyeball icon, and if you click that, it hides the contents of the layer, but it doesn't delete the layer. So I still have my layer 1 and I can still see the thumbnail, but I can't see it within my workspace right here. Then to get it back, I just need to click again. So I can unclick them. All of them, really, you can get it completely blank. This one, when I have this background layer not showing, you can see that transparent background on here as well. So we can see that transparency. And then when the background layer is clicked, it's brought back the white solid background. Another thing you can do within your layers panel is move your layers around. Right now I've got this yellow triangle is clearly on top, and it's also on the top layer of my layers panel. But let's say I want to change that. I just need to click and drag it down, and now I've got this circle layer on top and the triangle kind of between the blue square and the pink circle. But what about this background layer? I can't move that. If I click and drag it up, it just comes right back, and that's because the layer is locked. So to unlock the layer, I can just double click OK if that pops up, and now I can move this layer around, but the problem is that it doesn't have a transparent background. So right now I'm covering up that yellow triangle. I can't see it because the blue square has a white background instead of transparent. So just kind of keep in mind how that functions as you're building your Photoshop files. So anyway, that is the basic way that Photoshop works, just kind of a basic layers overview and a basic move overview and how to transform your shapes. All right, thanks for watching.